Suddenly everything is toxic. And once you label things toxic, you're justified in just totally dismissing
Especially
them.
people.
Especially people. On Instagram and Pinterest, the mantras are ruthless. There's no better self-care than cutting off people who are toxic for you. 7 tips for eliminating toxic people from your life. There's even a WebMD page. There's even a WebMD page about how to identify a toxic person, defined as anyone whose behavior adds negatively and upsets your life. Toxicity is just anyone who interferes with your life. We've kind of lost the idea that part of human experience is dealing with other people, some of whom you might love dearly, but have moments of friction with, which is just normal life. And now because they're impeding your goals, ambitions, or just your feelings, frankly, you can say, you're toxic, I'm done.
Cut them off.
Cut them off.
We're done.
There are people in non-power dynamic relationships, peer relationships, dating relationships, marriage relationships, whatever, and they're just in conflict. They're just having a tension or a problem, a disagreement, but it gets labeled as toxic or abusive, which then cuts off the possibility of reconciliation, of understanding, of forgiveness, of mutual care, because that's not possible. It's just, this makes me feel bad, therefore it must be abuse slash toxicity, and I can run away from it. All right, Esau, pastor.
Yeah.
How do you see this toxic language coming into the church in a way which
I'm glad you asked me about
may
this.
or may not be helpful?
One of the things that I love about when I was a youth leader, and we were a youth leader in New England, like the awkward kid could come to youth group. Like if you didn't have a social circle anywhere else, you could come into the church and we would accept you. And so I just think we've lost some of that sense of living together across difference and dealing with brokenness and even socially awkwardness as a part of what it means to be in community. Maybe the church can become the place where people aren't tossed aside when they make mistakes.
And as it relates to the church, when we've all had our eyes open to the enormous amount of abuse that has existed that for generations past got ignored or covered up or brushed under the rug or whatever. And yet, I wonder if sometimes now having those experiences, people come into a new congregation or a new church, and the moment they experience discomfort, the moment they experience fallen people and brokenness and just the messy realities that you're discussing or that Paul talks about in Christian community, they get triggered by that and they label it toxic and then they walk away. And there is a difference between genuine abuse and just broken human communities.
I would just say abuse. You don't have to call it. There's no, like, if it's not abuse, then I get what you mean. So like there's abuse. So the tricky part is there's like actually at least 3 categories. There's just like sins that are annoyances. Then there's kind of like, I'll call them like grievous sins. But then there's like abuse. In other words, someone could actually wrong you in a significant way. That is not abusive. It's just like kind of sucks.
Right.
And so like, I'm serious. And so, like,
I understand.
And so sometimes even in a church, there are significant disagreements that we have to try to work our way through as a part of a manifestation of God's ability to reconcile things. And so what I think used to happen is we used to say, work through it. And the unspoken like word was, no matter how bad it is, you work through it. So like, in other words, we didn't give people the mental out for if you're being abusive, right? So we say like, you should stay together. And like, we didn't consider, well, no, in some cases that you should stay together, you should work through it. It's actually bad advice. And so people felt trapped by that relationship. Now it's almost the opposite. It's like, okay, now we are very clear to say, hey, if you're in this bad situation, because we know we haven't said these things, these are all the scenarios in which you can leave. But I'm not sure we've articulated a good theology of how to work through non-abusive but complicated situations, which will mark all of our lives as Christians or as human beings.
In this article, it's not talking about marriages.
No,
it's not. It's talking about just ordinary workplace relationships, friendships, social engagements. It started with a simple disagreement, I think, about, was it a TV show or something? And someone wrote off the other person, you're toxic, and never talk to them again. Like that's the kind of stuff that's insane.
I get called toxic in my my thread, my friend thread, because I'm the one LeBron fan. So I'm worried I'm going to go on the verge of getting kicked out of the friend group, but that's another question.
Okay, before we go, Caitlin, final word on this. Do you think what does the church or do Christian Voices have to contribute to this dilemma in the broader culture, this writing off of everything and everyone is toxic?
It kind of relates to what we were saying earlier about just how kind of lonely and disconnected we are. Because I think a really important part of this feature that speaks to what you all were just saying about, like, are we pendulum swinging? Part of the reason I think this phenomenon makes so much sense, why the internet speak, bleeds into real life so significantly, is because the kind of setting was already primed for that by how disconnected we are, by how lonely, how little community we have. If you haven't been brought up in a rich community, especially full of people who you're not related to, who you don't live in the same household with, you don't have the same experience of working through this. I, even as an adult, had to really learn this to a certain extent because I was a military kid who didn't have a lot of connections to extended family, who moved every 1 or 2 years. And I remember as a college student in my last year of college suddenly realizing I've never been friends with people for 4 years. You can actually go without conflict for 1 or 2 years. A few years in is when you start to go like, okay, either this relationship is over or we have to work something out. And I had not considered before, like, oh, I actually have to say this thing that's hard. Because in the past, if something came up that was hard, I'm like, well, I'm moving in 6 months, so I'm not going to bring it up. We're not going to have the hard conversation. The church should be a place where we can say, like, we actually recognize not just the practice of community, of church potlucks and of bringing meals to people who are in the hospital and of helping people move, but we also believe something really countercultural, which is that we don't actually just choose all the obligations we have. Like, that's the kind of liberal idea of how you exist as a human in the world. I'm ultimately alone, and if I take on any obligations, those are freely chosen by me. I choose to be in this family, or I choose to have these friends. Part of the, like, kind of insane thing the church believes is, like, I belong to these people, and I discover one day that I have obligations to them that I didn't choose. I have this experience every Sunday in my church. This happened last week where someone was baptized. I did not personally verify that this person should become part of our community, or the teenagers that got confirmed a few weeks ago, or the new members that get added. I know them, and I hope to continue to be in deep relationship with them. But this little baby, I did not, like, choose to be in community with, or these new members, I did not choose to be in community with. And part of the amazing thing that the gospel asks of me is to say, like, no, actually, I belong to you without me choosing it. I discover this obligation. We'll have to work things out. And there might come a point, to your point, Skye, that, like, this church is doing something abusive or wrong, and I do have to leave. But that's a high bar, actually, especially in a culture that says, let's cut and run if anything gets difficult. The church gets the opportunity. We've failed at it so consistently, but we have the opportunity to witness to the world that says, actually, there's something beautiful here that you are actually, even if you're not aware of it, hungry for, which is discovering and belonging to each other and having those obligations, not as a burden on you. Sometimes they're hard, but as a real gift to each other as well.
Hey, if you like this video, like and subscribe so that you can get more Holy Post content and others can find it as well.